My father introduced me as the unfortunate byproduct of a past mistake while I was holding a bowl of roasted carrots. That was Vance Abbott for you. Most fathers would wait until dessert to ruin a family dinner. Mine liked to get straight to business. Efficient. Cold. Very on brand. We were standing in the formal dining room of the Abbott house. The same house where every autumn dinner felt less like a family gathering and more like a board meeting with better silverware. The table was long enough to seat a small jury. The candles were real, because Beatrice believed battery candles were for people who bought wine at gas stations. The napkins were folded into little fans. The soup spoons were placed at the exact angle Beatrice liked, and there I was. 28 years old. Still being treated like a stain, somebody had tried and failed to scrub out of the family carpet. The man beside my father was new. Tall. Gray-haired. Expensive watch. Pale smile. Some business partner from Connecticut. I think. Vance had been working him all evening. Using that smooth voice he saved for bankers, investors, and people he wanted to impress. Then the man turned to me and said, "And you are?" Before I could answer, my father did it for me. "This is Clara," he said, barely looking in my direction. The unfortunate byproduct of a past mistake. The room went quiet in that special rich people way, where nobody gasps because that would be tacky, but everybody hears every word. I felt the bowl warm against my palms. The business partner blinked. He looked at me, then at my father, trying to decide whether he had misheard. I almost helped him out. "No. Sir. Your ears are working fine. My father just called me a mistake next to the mashed potatoes. But I had learned a long time ago that reacting in that house only fed the machine. So I smiled politely and said, 'Nice to meet you.' The man gave me a tight nod. The kind people give when they suddenly wish they had stayed home with leftovers. My half-sister, Jocelyn, didn't even look up from her phone. Well, technically, I had always been told she was my half-sister. In the Abbott family, even basic facts came wrapped in fog. Guilt. And somebody else's version of the truth. Jocelyn was 26. Golden-haired. Golden child. And golden enough to make King Midas look underdressed. She had never been introduced as a mistake. She was introduced as brilliant. Ambitious. The future of Abbott Holdings. Never mind that her biggest business skill was charging brunch to a corporate card and calling it networking. Beatrice sat at the far end of the table in a cream blouse. Pearls at her throat. Face arranged into patient suffering. She had worn that expression my entire life. If there were Olympic medals for looking wounded while doing absolutely nothing, Beatrice would have brought home gold every 4 years. For as long as I could remember, I had been told I was the affair child, not always with those exact words. Families like mine like to dress cruelty up in manners. When I was little, it was, "Clara, you need to understand your place." When I got older, it became, "You should be grateful Beatrice raised you at all." At holidays, it was, "Let's not make this harder than it already is." And when my father had a drink in his hand and an audience he trusted, it became what he had said that night. The unfortunate byproduct of a past mistake. The funny thing about hearing something cruel for 28 years is that it does not hurt less. You just get better at not giving people the satisfaction of seeing where it landed. Dinner continued because, apparently, dignity had left the building but the salmon had not. Vance talked about commercial properties, restructuring, legacy planning, and responsible succession. Jocelyn nodded at the right times while texting under the table. Beatrice asked the business partner's wife about Palm Beach. I cut my food into small pieces and listened. That was another thing I had learned in that house. When people think you are powerless, they speak freely around you. Halfway through dinner, Vance set down his wine glass and tapped 2 fingers on the table. "Well," he said, "since Clara is here, we might as well handle the practical matter." I looked up. There it was. The real reason I had been invited. I should have known. I was not usually included unless someone needed a witness, a scapegoat, or a warm body to make the seating chart even. Vance reached beside his chair and lifted a slim leather folder. Then he placed it on the table in front of my plate. Not handed it to me. Placed it there, like a bill. Beside it, he set a sealed box. A DNA testing kit. The room became very still. Beatrice lowered her eyes and pressed a folded napkin to the corner of one eye. No tears. Of course. Actual crying could wrinkle the makeup. Jocelyn finally looked up from her phone. Not concerned. Interested. The way people get interested when a waiter drops a tray. What is this? I asked. My voice sounded steady. That surprised me a little. Vance leaned back in his chair. Clarity. That was one of his favorite words. Men like Vance loved words like clarity, discipline, and legacy. They made selfish decisions sound like stone tablets from a mountain. He opened the folder and turned the top page toward me. I am finalizing the restructuring of Abbott Holdings, he said. Jocelyn will be taking a more formal leadership position. It's time to clean up old complications. Old complications. That was me. I looked at the document. Legal language. Dense paragraphs. My name printed in several places. Clara Abbott. Severance of familial claim. Waiver of inheritance interest. Voluntary acknowledgement of non-paternity. Non-paternity. I almost laughed. My father had spent my entire life punishing me for being proof of his supposed affair. Now he wanted me to sign a document saying he was not my father at all. You have to admire the creativity. It takes real talent to ruin somebody's childhood and then ask them to notarize it. You want me to sign this? I asked. I want this settled, he said. Beatrice gave a delicate sigh. Clara, please don't make this ugly. That was rich. Coming from a woman who had spent decades polishing ugly until it reflected well in candlelight. She dabbed her eye again and looked toward the business partner, as if he were witnessing a noble woman endure a house fire. It's time, Beatrice said softly. We stop living this lie. I looked at her. For years, Beatrice had played the martyr. She told church ladies she had taken me in out of Christian duty. She told relatives she had forgiven more than any wife should have to forgive. She told me, whenever I forgot my assigned role, that blood did not make a mother. Funny thing was, she had never acted like a mother either. Vance tapped the DNA kit with one finger. The test is already arranged, he said. Simple cheek swab. We'll have the results expedited through my legal team. Once confirmed, you sign the waiver, and we can all move forward. Move forward. Another clean little phrase. What happens if I don't? I asked. Jocelyn laughed under her breath. It was not loud. Just enough. Vance's face did not change. Then you force me to pursue formal action. Publicly. If necessary. There it was. The threat in a suit and tie. I looked around the table. At my father, who had never once hugged me without looking like someone might charge him for it. At Beatrice, who wore suffering like perfume. At Jocelyn, who had been handed every open door in the family and still acted tired from all the walking. At the business partner, who stared down at his plate like the asparagus had become deeply fascinating. Something settled inside me then. Not rage. Not even grief. Those had both been with me so long they practically had their own rooms in my apartment. This was different. It was clarity. Real clarity. Not Vance's polished version. Mine. I reached for the DNA kit. For the first time that night, my father's eyes sharpened. He expected a scene. He expected tears. Maybe begging. Maybe a speech about how he was the only father I had ever known. I gave him none of that. I picked up the box, turned it over in my hands, and read the label. Then I slipped it into my purse. I'll take the test, I said. Beatrice exhaled as if she had just survived something biblical. Jocelyn smirked and went back to her phone. Vance nodded once. Satisfied. Good. My attorney will contact you tomorrow. No, I said. That one word changed the air. Vance looked at me. I closed the leather folder and rested my hand on top of it. I'll use an independent, court-approved facility, I said. Chain of custody. Verified identification. Sealed results sent directly to me and my attorney. The table went silent again. This time, it was not polite silence. It was the kind that tells you somebody's plan just stepped on a rake. Vance stared at me for half a second too long. And for the first time in my entire life, I saw it. Not anger. Not disgust. Panic. It was quick. Barely there. A little break in his mouth. A flicker in his eyes. The mask slipped so fast most people would have missed it, but I did not miss it. I had spent 28 years studying that man's face for signs of danger. I knew every version of his disappointment, every shade of his contempt, every quiet warning before he cut someone down. This was new. My father was afraid. I stood, picked up my purse, and looked at the three people who had spent my whole life telling me what I was. A mistake, a burden, a reminder, an affair child. Well, I said, I guess we'll finally get the truth. Then I walked out before dessert, which was a shame. Because Beatrice had ordered my favorite cheesecake, not because she cared. Because in that family, even cruelty came with good catering. I kept my purse tucked under my arm all the way to the parking lot. Like that little DNA kit might grow legs and run back to my father if I gave it room. The night air was cold enough to bite, and the Abbott driveway looked exactly like it always did after one of Beatrice's polished dinners. Warm windows, perfect hedges, imported cars lined up like showroom decorations. From the outside, that house looked like old money, good taste, and family tradition. From the inside, it felt more like a museum exhibit titled, "What Happens When Nobody Tells the Truth for Almost 3 Decades?" I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there for a minute with both hands on the steering wheel. I did not cry. That surprised me. There were years when one sharp sentence from Vance could send me into the bathroom for 20 minutes, pretending I had allergies. There were birthdays when I smiled through Beatrice's little speeches about forgiveness and went home feeling like I had been scraped hollow. There were Christmas mornings when Jocelyn opened jewelry, trips, cars, and designer bags, while I got envelopes with checks written in Vance's cold handwriting, as if affection could be deducted as a business expense. But that night, I did not cry. I kept seeing that flash in my father's face. Panic. Not irritation, not inconvenience. Panic. That tiny break told me more than anything he had said at the table. So instead of driving home, I drove to a 24-hour copy center near my apartment. It smelled like toner, burnt coffee, and somebody's bad life choices. A tired college kid behind the counter barely looked up while I made copies of every page in Vance's folder. Then I scanned them to a new encrypted drive. Then I took pictures of the DNA kit, the label, the barcode, the return address. Everything. Maybe that sounds dramatic. It was not. It was what happens when you grow up in a house where every conversation can become evidence later. By the time I got home, it was after midnight. My apartment was small, clean, and quiet. 1 bedroom, decent kitchen, rent that made me question my life choices twice a month. Nothing like the Abbott house. But everything in it was mine. The couch was mine. The coffee mugs were mine. The slightly wobbly kitchen table was mine. Nobody had bought it to remind me I should be grateful. I put Vance's DNA kit in a drawer and did not open it. The next morning, I called an independent lab that handled court-admissible genetic testing. Not one of those cute ancestry kits people use to find out they are 12% Irish and suddenly start saying, "Top of the morning." This was a proper facility with identification checks, chain of custody, sealed samples, witnessed collection, and documentation that could stand up in court. The woman on the phone was professional and calm. "Yes, ma'am," she said. "You'll need a government-issued photo ID. We'll collect the sample here. If another party is involved, they'll need to appear separately or submit through an approved collection site." "I'm the only one coming in," I said. "For now." She paused just long enough to notice the story sitting underneath those words, then kept her voice neutral. "We can schedule you tomorrow morning." I took the appointment. Vance called 3 times before lunch. I let each call go to voicemail. Then came the text. "Clara, my attorney will send you instructions. Use the kit provided. Do not complicate this." I stared at the message while eating cereal over the sink like a woman with class, dignity, and no clean bowls. Do not complicate this. That had been the family motto, whether anybody admitted it or not. Do not complicate Beatrice's pain. Do not complicate Jocelyn's future. Do not complicate Vance's reputation. Do not complicate the lie by asking questions. I typed back one sentence. "I have scheduled testing through an independent court-approved facility." His reply came less than a minute later. "Unnecessary." Then another. This is exactly the kind of behavior that makes cooperation difficult. Then another. You are creating legal exposure for yourself. There he was, my father. The human thunderstorm in a tailored jacket. I did not answer. The clinic was in a medical office building near downtown, tucked between a physical therapy practice and a dentist who had chosen a giant smiling tooth as his logo. The waiting room had gray chairs, a fake plant, and daytime television playing with the volume low. Nothing emotional, nothing dramatic, no thunder, no family portraits falling off walls. Just fluorescent lights and a receptionist asking me to sign forms. Honestly, I appreciated that. The woman at the desk checked my driver's license, had me sign my name in 3 places, and placed a numbered sticker on my paperwork. A technician led me into a small room with a counter, gloves, sealed swabs, and a printer humming quietly in the corner. Have you done this before? She asked. No. She nodded. Kind, but not nosy. It's simple. I'll verify the kit number. Open the swabs in front of you. Collect the cheek samples. Seal them. And you'll sign across the seal. The results will be sent according to your instructions. Simple. That word almost made me laugh. A cheek swab was simple. 28 years of being called an affair child was not. I sat still while she rubbed the swab inside my cheek. Left side. Right side. Another swab for backup. She labeled everything. Sealed everything. Documented everything. It was clinical. Quiet. And strangely respectful. Nobody in that room asked whether I deserved the truth. They just helped me get it. When I stepped outside, my phone had 6 missed calls. 2 from Vance. 1 from Beatrice. 3 from a number I did not recognize, which turned out to be a lawyer from Vance's firm, leaving a voicemail so polished it practically wore cufflinks. Miss Abbott. This is Daniel Mercer representing Abbott Holdings and Mr. Vance Abbott. We understand you may have concerns about the documentation provided. We would like to assist you in reaching an efficient resolution. Efficient resolution. There was another phrase men used when they meant, please stop wandering near the locked door. Over the next 2 weeks, Vance shifted from cold pressure to aggressive pressure. His lawyer emailed, then called, then emailed again. He wanted me to sign a preliminary acknowledgement, then a confidentiality agreement, then a waiver allowing Vance's legal team to coordinate the DNA results. I ignored all of it except to forward each message to a new email folder labeled evidence. Petty? Organized? Absolutely. Beatrice called once. I almost did not answer. But curiosity got the better of me. That has caused more trouble in human history than greed. And I say that with respect to both. Clara, she said. Voice, soft and strained. Your father is under enormous stress. I stood in my kitchen, watching rain slide down the window. Is he? You don't understand what this is doing to the family. That one nearly got a laugh out of me. The family has been doing this to me since I was old enough to understand English. She went quiet. Then she said, you always were difficult. There it was. The real Beatrice, peeking out from behind the lace curtains. No, I said. I was inconvenient. She hung up. Jocelyn sent one text. You're embarrassing yourself. I replied before I could stop myself. That must be hard for you. Since embarrassment usually requires self-awareness. Not my most mature moment. Still worth it. The waiting was the worst part. I went to work. I cleaned my apartment. I bought groceries. I watched old sitcom reruns because sometimes the human brain needs low-stakes problems. Like a neighbor borrowing a lawnmower and not giving it back. But under every ordinary thing was the same question. What was Vance afraid of? If the test proved I was not his child, he would win. He would get his clean paperwork, his public story, his legal separation, and another reason to look at me like I had personally lowered the property values. So why had his face cracked when I said independent facility? The answer arrived on a Thursday afternoon. A thick envelope, plain white, my name typed across the front, Clara Abbott. I set it on my kitchen table and stared at it for a full 5 minutes. There are moments in life when you know whatever happens next is going to split everything into before and after. You can still hear the refrigerator running. You can still see a coffee ring on the table. You can still notice that you forgot to buy paper towels. But you know, once you open the envelope, you do not get to unknow what is inside. I made myself sit down. Then I opened it. The report was several pages long. full of tables, markers, percentages, and language that looked designed to make ordinary people feel underqualified for their own lives. I forced myself to read slowly. The first result hit so hard I stopped breathing for a second. Probability of paternity, greater than 99.9%. Vance Abbott was my biological father. I read it again. Then again. The room stayed exactly the same. My father was my father. After 28 years of calling me an affair child, after 28 years of treating me like living evidence of his shame, after making me sit across from him while he tried to legally erase me from his life. The test said what some quiet part of me had always suspected. He knew. He had always known. I felt a laugh come up, sharp and humorless. Of course he was my father. Of course the man who denied me had no scientific reason to deny me. That would have been too simple. Too clean. And the Abbott family never did clean unless guests were coming. I kept reading. That was when I saw the second section. Maternal relationship comparison. Beatrice Abbott. The line below her name looked wrong at first. My brain refused to take it in. Probability of maternity, 0%. I stared at it. 0. Not low. Not inconclusive. 0. Beatrice was not my biological mother. The report blurred for a second, and I pressed my palm flat against the table. Vance was my father. Beatrice was not my mother, which meant the story I had been fed my entire life was not just cruel, it was impossible. They had not raised me under the shadow of an affair. They had raised me inside a cover-up. Every look Beatrice had given me, every sermon about forgiveness, every time Vance called me evidence of betrayal, every time Jocelyn treated me like some lesser branch on the family tree, it was all built on a lie. A big one. The kind people do not maintain for 28 years unless something valuable is buried underneath it. I sat there until the light outside my apartment turned gray. Then my phone buzzed. Vance. I looked at his name on the screen. For once, I did not feel small. I did not answer. Instead, I folded the results carefully, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it beside Vance's legal folder. Then I opened my laptop and searched 2 words I should have searched years ago. Evelyn Abbott. The first search result was an obituary, not a long one. Not the kind wealthy families publish when they want the whole county to know how deeply they are grieving. This one was short, tucked into an old newspaper archive. Barely more than a notice. Evelyn Margaret Abbott. Beloved wife, young mother, gone too soon. That was it. No mention of the real estate company. No mention of family money. No mention of the daughter she had supposedly left behind. Me. I sat at my kitchen table with the DNA report open beside my laptop and felt something in my chest tighten. Not from sadness, exactly, but from the strange anger that comes when you realize even your grief has been managed by other people. For 28 years, I had been told my birth mother was some unnamed woman who had wrecked Beatrice's marriage, humiliated Vance, and then disappeared from polite conversation like a bad smell. Nobody gave her a name. Nobody gave her a face. Nobody gave her a story. Now I had one. Evelyn, I said it out loud once, just to hear what it felt like. Evelyn. It sounded too gentle for a woman who had been erased so completely. The obituary said she died when I was an infant. That part lined up with the scraps I had been given over the years, though nobody had ever said it plainly. In the Abbott house, facts were served like vegetables to children. Small portions, overcooked, and only when someone decided you needed them. The next morning, I called in sick. I was not sick, unless you count being allergic to family fraud, which should be a billable medical condition. I drove to the county records office in a beige government building that looked like it had been designed by someone with a grudge against windows. Inside, the air smelled like old paper, floor wax, and patience. There were metal chairs, sleepy fluorescent lights, and a clerk behind the desk who had the expression of a woman who had seen every kind of family mess and no longer impressed easily. I'm looking for property records connected to Evelyn Abbott, I said. Also birth records, if available. Late 1990s. She looked over her glasses. You'll need to fill out a request form. Of course. She slid me a clipboard. The government loves a clipboard. Honestly, it may be the last thing holding this country together. I filled out my name, address, relationship, purpose of request, and every other box they gave me. Then I waited, and waited, and waited some more. While I sat there, I thought about Beatrice telling me I should be grateful she had raised me. I thought about Vance calling me a mistake in front of strangers. I thought about Jocelyn rolling her eyes whenever I walked into a room, as if my existence had interrupted her personal lighting. By the time the clerk called my name, I had gone through a lifetime of memories and one bad vending machine coffee. She placed a thin stack of copies on the counter. Some records are restricted, she said, but these are public filings. Dates, probate references, corporate property transfers. You may need a lawyer for the sealed material. I'm starting to think I need a priest, a lawyer, and maybe a licensed trapper, I said. The clerk almost smiled. Almost. I took the papers to a side table and began reading. At first, it was just names and parcel numbers. Commercial lots, office buildings, transfers, holding companies, trust references. The kind of paperwork most people would rather chew cardboard than read. Lucky for me, I worked as a data analyst. Boring documents did not scare me. Boring documents usually hid the good stuff. One name appeared again and again. Evelyn M. Abbott. Not Vance. Evelyn. She was listed on early acquisition records tied to properties that later became the backbone of Abbott Holdings. Downtown office space. Retail plazas. A warehouse district that had been converted into luxury lofts. Parcels that everyone in my family talked about as if Vance had built them with his own bare hands and a heroic amount of masculine wisdom. But the records told a different story. Evelyn had owned them first. Evelyn had signed the original purchase documents. Evelyn's name was on the early deeds. Then, not long after her death, everything began moving through legal instruments I did not fully understand. Trust references, guardian filings, estate transfers, redactions. A name stamped on several documents caught my eye. Arthur Sterling, attorney at law. The name sounded familiar, but not from my childhood. More like something I had seen buried in old paperwork at the Abbott office years ago when I was doing temporary filing work during college. Vance had loved using me for unpaid labor while reminding me I had no real claim to the family business. A charming arrangement. If you enjoy hypocrisy with office supplies, I copied Arthur Sterling's name into my phone. The clerk helped me locate an old professional address. His office had closed years ago, but after a few more searches, I found a current mailing address in a small town about 40 miles outside the city. Retired. Of course he was retired. Everyone useful in this mess seemed to be either dead, retired, or lying through capped teeth. I drove there that afternoon. Arthur Sterling lived in a modest brick house with a neat front lawn, white porch railings, and an American flag mounted by the door. No mansion, no security gate, no marble lions. Just a quiet house that looked like somebody there, paid bills on time, and knew where the good scissors were kept. I almost turned around. Showing up at a retired lawyer's house with a DNA report and a family scandal is not exactly normal behavior. Then again, nothing about my life had been normal since I was introduced as a mistake over roasted carrots. So I knocked. A man in his late 70s opened the door. Tall, thin, silver hair, sharp blue eyes. He leaned lightly on a cane, but there was nothing weak about him. Yes? Mr. Sterling? That depends who's asking. My name is Clara Abbott. The color drained from his face. Not slowly. Immediately. His hand tightened on the doorframe. For 1 second, I thought he might shut the door. Instead, he whispered, "That's not possible." I had heard many greetings in my life. That one was new. "I'm sorry," I said. "Do you know me?" He stared at me as if I had stepped out of a grave. Then he opened the door wider. "You'd better come in." His living room was tidy and warm, with framed law degrees on the wall and a shelf full of old casebooks. He offered me coffee. I accepted because at that point my blood type was mostly caffeine and suspicion. We sat across from each other at a small round table. Arthur kept looking at my face. Not in a rude way. In a haunted way. "You look like her," he said. "My mother?" His eyes softened. "Evelyn." That was the first time anyone had said those two words together. "My mother, Evelyn." I took the DNA report from my bag and placed it on the table. Then the county records. Then the copies from Vance's folder. Arthur read silently. His face changed with every page. By the time he finished, the old lawyer in him had fully awakened. His shoulders straightened. His eyes went cold in a way I recognized. Not cruel, focused. "I was told you died," he said. The room tilted a little. "What?" He removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Vance told me there was a car accident when you were a toddler. He said you didn't survive. Beatrice confirmed it. There were documents." My mouth went dry. "They told you I was dead?" "Yes." I leaned back in the chair and let that sink in. My father had not only told me my mother was shame, he had told my mother's lawyer I was dead. That was not a family lie. That was architecture. Arthur stood carefully and walked to an old desk near the window. He unlocked the bottom drawer and removed a key ring. Then he turned back to me. "There's something you need to see." We drove to a local bank branch in his old sedan. He did not talk much on the way. And I did not ask questions because I was afraid the answers might start swinging. Inside the bank, Arthur signed forms, showed identification, and requested access to a safety deposit box. The bank manager treated him with careful respect, the kind reserved for people who have either a long history with the bank or know where legal bodies are buried. Maybe both. In a private viewing room, Arthur set a long metal box on the table. Then he opened it. Inside were folders, sealed envelopes, a stack of photographs, and a thick legal binder with my mother's name on the front. Evelyn M. Abbott Trust. Arthur touched the binder like it mattered. "Your mother was not penniless," he said. "She was brilliant, careful, and very aware of who she had married." I could not speak. He opened the binder and turned to the first page. Evelyn founded the company that became Abbott Holdings. Vance marketed it. He charmed investors. He shook hands. But the original capital, the property acquisitions, the structure, all of that was Evelyn. He slid the papers toward me. "She created this trust to protect the assets for you." "For me?" Arthur nodded. "It matures on your 30th birthday." The words landed slowly. My 30th birthday. Less than 2 years away. Arthur kept turning pages, explaining in plain English because he must have seen my face losing blood. The company my father claimed as his empire had been built from Evelyn's assets. The properties were supposed to remain protected until I reached 30. Vance had been allowed limited management authority, but not ownership, not full control, not the right to drain it. "And has he?" I asked, though I already knew. Arthur's mouth hardened. "I don't have current records. But if he is trying to force you to sign a severance and inheritance waiver before your 30th birthday, I would say yes. He has been taking something that was never his." I looked down at the binder. For 28 years, Vance had called me a mistake. But I was not the mistake. I was the obstacle. Beatrice was not the betrayed wife. She was part of the cover. And Jocelyn, sweet golden Jocelyn, had likely been living off money that belonged to the woman whose name they had buried. My mother, Evelyn. Arthur reached into the box and took out a photograph. A young woman stood in front of a half-built office building, wearing jeans, boots, and a hard hat, smiling like she knew exactly what she was doing. She had my eyes. For the first time in my life, I looked at someone from my family and did not feel ashamed. Arthur's voice was quiet. "Clara, if Vance knows you took an independent DNA test, he knows the clock has started." I looked up. "What clock?" Arthur closed the trust binder. "The one he has been racing against since the day your mother died." I left the bank with my mother's photograph in my purse and the uncomfortable feeling that my entire childhood had been one long accounting trick. That may not sound emotional, but trust me, it was plenty emotional. Some families hide affairs. Some hide drinking problems. Mine apparently hid a real estate empire, a dead woman's trust, and a daughter they pretended was both shameful and dead, depending on who was asking. Very efficient people. The Abbotts. Arthur sent me home with copies of what he could legally release that day. Trust summaries, old deed references, notes in Evelyn's handwriting. Enough to prove there was a real structure, a real estate trail, and a very real reason Vance had been sweating under his expensive collar. He also gave me one warning before I left. "Do not confront him yet." I almost smiled. "That's becoming my favorite hobby." "I'm serious, Clara. Men like Vance don't panic because of feelings. They panic because of exposure. That stayed with me. Exposure. Not truth. Not guilt. Exposure. When I got back to my apartment, I spread the documents across my kitchen table. There was barely enough room left for my coffee mug, which felt disrespectful to both the evidence and the coffee. But I made it work. I worked as a data analyst for a mid-sized healthcare software company. My job was not glamorous. Nobody invited me to ribbon cuttings. Nobody wrote magazine profiles about my spreadsheet formulas. Though frankly, they should have. But I knew how to read patterns. I knew how to compare dates, names, filings, transfers, and amounts. Most lies look dramatic when people tell them out loud. On paper, they usually look boring. That is where they get careless. I started with public corporate filings for Abbott Holdings. Vance had always told people he built the company from nothing. That was almost true. If by nothing you mean his first wife's property, her capital, her legal structure, and her trust. The earliest assets had Evelyn's fingerprints all over them. Commercial lots purchased under her name before her death, building permits tied to entities she had formed, old financing documents showing her as the original guarantor. Then, after she died, Vance's name began appearing more and more often. Manager, acting trustee, executive chairman, controlling officer. The title changed. The assets did not. They still traced back to Evelyn. I opened a fresh spreadsheet. Because apparently when my life falls apart, I like columns. Property name, date acquired, original owner, current owner, transfer record, trust reference, debt attached, related party. One by one. The picture sharpened. Downtown retail plaza, industrial redevelopment site, medical office complex, 2 apartment towers, a commercial high-rise on West Monroe. One of the most valuable buildings in the portfolio. I knew that building. Everybody in the city knew that building. 30 stories of glass, steel, and corporate attitude. Vance had posed in front of it for a business magazine cover years ago. Arms crossed, chin lifted, pretending he had personally invented capitalism. The caption called him a self-made visionary. I remembered Beatrice framing that article and placing it near the downstairs powder room. Because nothing says humble success like making guests admire your husband on their way to wash their hands. By midnight, I had 3 screens open, and one very cold frozen dinner sitting untouched beside me. Then I started searching Jocelyn. That was easier. Jocelyn did not hide wealth. Jocelyn believed wealth was pointless unless strangers could see it from across a restaurant. Her boutique public relations firm had a glossy website with soft beige branding and phrases like legacy storytelling and reputation architecture. From what I could tell, her firm mostly planned private events for women who used the word curated too often. Still, the business owned a downtown office suite, a very expensive one. The purchase record showed a holding company. That holding company connected to another company. That company connected to an Abbott Holdings subsidiary. And that subsidiary, if I followed the old filings correctly, was funded by an asset that belonged to Evelyn's trust. I leaned back in my chair. Well, look at that, I said to my empty apartment. Jocelyn's office has a mother. Not Beatrice. Mine. From there, it got uglier. Jocelyn's luxury condo had been purchased through a family investment vehicle. Her vacation property in Aspen had a financing trail tied to a trust-backed line of credit. Her so-called independent PR firm received consulting advances from Abbott Holdings. Even though I could not find evidence she had consulted on anything except floral arrangements and how to look concerned in photographs, there were vehicle leases too. A silver Porsche, a black Range Rover, a vintage convertible she had once called a little reward to myself on social media. Must have been exhausting rewarding herself with my mother's money. I created another tab. Jocelyn benefits, then another. Suspicious transfers. By 3 in the morning, I had mapped enough to feel sick. Money had flowed from trust-linked assets into Jocelyn's lifestyle for years, not directly in a way that would make an amateur obvious, but through layers. Management fees, personal loans, consulting agreements, renovation budgets, vendor reimbursements, phantom marketing expenses, a whole little family buffet of polite theft. And there it was. The reason for the DNA kit, the The reason for the legal folder. The reason Vance wanted me to sign away claims before the independent test could create a record. He was not trying to prove I was not his daughter. He was trying to make me legally agree I did not matter before I discovered that I mattered very much. I took a screenshot of a transfer schedule and sent it to Arthur through the secure email he had set up before I left his house. The man was retired, but he prepared like a general who had been waiting 28 years for someone to hand him a sword. His reply came at 7:15 the next morning. Do not touch Abbott systems. Public records only. I will contact a forensic accountant. We need admissible documentation. I appreciated the reminder. Even though part of me wanted to walk into Abbott Holdings with a bullhorn and a stapler, instead, I made coffee and kept going. The deeper I looked, the more the family story changed shape. Vance had not rejected me because I was shameful. He had trained me to accept rejection so I would never question exclusion. Beatrice had not suffered because I existed. She had performed suffering because it protected her position. Jocelyn had not simply been favored. She had been funded. All those years, I thought I was watching my sister receive love I had not earned. Birthday trips, private schools, designer clothes, a car with a ribbon on it when she turned 16, a launch party for her business, a down payment on her condo, her name on charity boards, gala committees, and magazine lists of young women to watch. I used to wonder what was wrong with me. That is the cruelest thing about family lies. They do not just hide facts, they teach you to blame yourself for the missing pieces. By the end of the week, Arthur and I had a routine. I pulled public records. He reviewed legal relevance. His forensic accountant, a woman named Marisol Grant, checked the financial logic and politely destroyed my sleep schedule with phrases like pattern of misappropriation and probable breach of fiduciary duty. Marisol was sharp, dry, and not impressed by rich people. Naturally, I liked her immediately. During our first call, she said, Clara, I've seen family businesses get messy. But this is not messy. This is organized. Is that better or worse? Legally, worse for them. Emotionally, I recommend snacks. She was right. I bought pretzels. 2 days later, Marisol flagged a pending transaction. The subject line of her email was simple. Urgent. Anchor asset transfer. I opened the attachment at my desk during lunch, and the office noise around me faded. The West Monroe high-rise. The 30-story crown jewel. The asset that anchored Evelyn's trust portfolio. Vance and Jocelyn were preparing to liquidate it through a private transfer. Sale price, $45 million. Scheduled closing, less than a week away. I read the document twice, then a third time because my brain was trying to be polite and reject the obvious. The buyer entity was newly formed. The ownership records were thin, but Marisol had traced enough to suspect it was tied to Jocelyn's upcoming marriage. Her fiancé came from a powerful political family. Old connections, big donors, reputation polished to a shine. Vance must have believed that if he could use the high-rise money to secure Jocelyn's place in that family, they would gain protection, influence, and enough cash movement to bury the old trail. It was not just theft, it was a getaway car wearing a wedding veil. I called Arthur. He answered on the second ring. Tell me, he said. They're selling West Monroe. Silence. Then, very quietly, when? Closing is scheduled in 6 days. Another silence. Not confused, calculating. That building should never move without trust review, he said. Vance does not have unilateral authority to liquidate the anchor asset, not unless he has falsified approvals or hidden the trust classification. Can we stop it? We can try. That was not the answer I wanted. Of course. Clara. Justice arrives Tuesday at noon with a marching band. But real life does not work like that. Real life gives you deadlines, paperwork, and men like Vance who have been lying longer than you have been alive. Arthur exhaled. We need stronger evidence quickly. If they close before we file, unwinding it becomes harder. I looked at the screen. The transfer documents were dated. The signatures were pending. Jocelyn's name appeared in a side agreement connected to event financing, luxury housing arrangements, and a marital asset disclosure package. She was not just benefiting, she was participating. That hurt more than I expected. I had never believed Jocelyn loved me. But some small, stupid part of me had thought maybe she was just spoiled. Maybe she did not know how deep the lie went. Maybe she was another product of Vance's household. Shinier than me but still trapped in his version of reality. No, Jocelyn was not trapped. She was decorating the cage. My phone buzzed before I could say anything else. A text from Vance. You have had enough time. My attorney expects your signature by Friday. I stared at it. Friday. The day before the asset transfer? Of course, he needed my waiver before the sale. One signature from me. And he would argue I had no standing. No claim. No right to interfere. Just the affair child signing herself out of the story like she had been trained to do. I forwarded the message to Arthur, then I typed back to Vance. I'm reviewing everything carefully. His reply came fast. For once in your life, Clara, do not be difficult. I looked at the DNA report on my table. The trust documents. Evelyn's photograph. The high-rise transaction. The proof that my whole life had been arranged around keeping me quiet until they could empty what my mother left behind. Then I smiled, not happily, just enough. Because Vance had made one serious mistake. He had spent 28 years teaching me how to survive being underestimated. And now, with 6 days left before he sold my mother's building, he still had no idea I had learned how to read the fine print. I did not answer Vance's last message. Not because I was afraid of him. Because sometimes silence is the only reply that makes a bully start checking the locks. Friday came with gray skies, cold coffee, and the kind of nervous energy that makes you open the refrigerator 3 times even though you know exactly what is in there. Arthur told me to go to work like normal. Marisol told me not to access anything connected to Abbott Holdings. Both of them told me to keep my phone charged. That last part felt comforting in the same way. A flight attendant telling you to locate the exits feels comforting. I went to the office anyway. My real job had nothing to do with Abbott Holdings. I was a data analyst at a healthcare software company in a plain office park with bad parking and one vending machine that ate dollar bills like it had a personal grudge. I liked the place. Nobody there cared who my father was. Nobody expected me to apologize for being born. My boss, Denise, judged people by whether they met deadlines and labeled files correctly, which honestly made her one of the fairest authority figures I had ever known. By 10 that morning, I had settled into my usual routine. Email, reports, data pulls. A meeting that could have been an email but had clearly chosen violence. Then Denise appeared at my desk. Her face was too controlled. Clara, she said, can you come with me? I knew immediately. You do not grow up with Vance Abbott and miss the sound of a trap being set. Sure, I said, saving my work. She led me past the conference rooms, past the break area, and into the large meeting room near the front entrance. 3 people were already inside. One was Daniel Mercer, Vance's attorney, looking polished and satisfied in a navy suit. One was a woman I did not know, mid-40s, sharp haircut, corporate badge clipped to her jacket. The third was Jocelyn. Of course it was Jocelyn. She sat with one leg crossed over the other, wearing a cream blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent and an expression that said she had come prepared to watch a small animal get removed from a building. Denise closed the door behind us. Clara, she said carefully, these individuals have brought a serious allegation involving Abbott Holdings and your use of company equipment. My company equipment? I asked. Daniel Mercer folded his hands on the table. Miss Abbott, we have evidence that you accessed proprietary Abbott Holdings systems from this workplace during business hours. I looked at him, then at Jocelyn. She smiled just enough to be irritating. The unknown woman opened a folder. My name is Paula Hensley, she said. I'm with an independent corporate investigations firm retained by Abbott Holdings. We are here to discuss unauthorized data access, corporate espionage, and possible embezzlement activity. Corporate espionage, embezzlement. Well, at least they had not gone small. Nobody could accuse the Abbotts of lacking ambition when committing character assassination. Denise looked at me, and I saw the worry in her eyes. That was what made me angry. Not Daniel, not Jocelyn, not even the accusation. They had dragged this into my workplace, my actual job, my clean record, my one stable corner of life that Vance had not been able to stain until now. I sat down slowly. Show me, Paula slid several printed logs across the table. IP addresses, access timestamps, file names, login records, data transfer flags, screenshots showing what appeared to be my credentials connected to Abbott Holdings systems. There were references to financial ledgers, internal transaction reports, board materials, and trust-related asset schedules. Very serious, very official, also very fake. Daniel leaned forward. Your father would prefer to handle this quietly. My father prefers many things, I said. Truth has never been high on the list. Jocelyn gave a small laugh. Still doing the wounded orphan routine? Denise's eyebrows moved just a little. I almost enjoyed that. Jocelyn always forgot that normal people could hear her. Daniel's smile tightened. Miss Abbott. The evidence is substantial. Abbott Holdings has grounds to refer this matter for federal investigation. Unauthorized intrusion into corporate financial systems is not a family disagreement. No, I said. It's not. Paula watched me closely. Unlike Daniel, she did not seem pleased. She seemed cautious. That told me something important. She believed she had been hired to investigate a real issue. She was not family. That made her useful. Daniel slid another document across the table. This is a settlement offer. Sign the acknowledgement of non-paternity, the inheritance waiver, and the confidentiality agreement. In exchange, Mr. Abbott will decline to pursue criminal charges and will classify your activity as an internal family matter. I looked at the papers. There it was again. The same old cage. With fresh paint. Jocelyn leaned back. Honestly, Clara, you should be grateful. Daddy is giving you a lifeline. Daddy. She said it like a crown. I looked at her manicured fingers resting on the table and wondered how many of my mother's stolen dollars had paid for that pale pink polish. Is that what this is? I asked. A lifeline? It's mercy, she said, which is more than you deserve after digging through things you don't understand. Denise cleared her throat. As Clara's employer, I need to understand whether any company systems were used illegally. If there is evidence against her, I'll review it. But I won't allow intimidation in this room. That was the first decent sentence I had heard all morning. I turned to Paula. Did your firm verify the raw server metadata? She paused. We reviewed logs provided by Abbott Holdings. Provided by whom? Daniel interrupted. That is not relevant. It's extremely relevant, I said. Paula's eyes shifted to him, then back to me. They were provided through internal counsel, she said. Jocelyn? Jocelyn's smile faded. Daniel said. Miss Abbott, you are not here to question the investigators. No, I said. Apparently I'm here to be framed efficiently. I opened my purse. Jocelyn's eyes flicked toward it. For the first time since I walked in, she looked less bored. I took out a small, encrypted flash drive and placed it on the table. Daniel stared at it as if I had set down a snake. What is that? He asked. Insurance. Jocelyn scoffed. That sounds dramatic. Good, I said. I'd hate to bore you. I looked at Paula. That drive contains copies of public records I gathered. My correspondence with Mr. Sterling, and a forensic review of the documents your firm is relying on. It also contains raw metadata from the files Daniel just handed me. Daniel's face hardened. You had no legal right to obtain proprietary metadata. I didn't obtain it from Abbott Systems, I said. I obtained it from the PDF packet your office emailed to my employer this morning. Denise looked at Daniel. Paula went still. That was the thing about rush traps. People forget that digital documents carry fingerprints, creation dates, edit histories, usernames, export paths, embedded references. Somebody at Daniel's office had converted the accusation packet quickly, probably assuming I would panic before reading anything carefully. But Panic and I had a complicated relationship. We had lived together for years. I knew how to work around it. Paula pulled a laptop from her bag. May I? She asked. Daniel stood halfway. I object to this, Denise said. This is not a courtroom. Mr. Mercer. I almost applauded. Paula inserted the drive. I gave her the password. She opened the metadata summary first. The room went quiet. There on the screen were the file histories. The logs accusing me had been generated after Vance's legal deadline text. The screenshots had been edited. The export path tied back to an Abbott Holdings administrative account. And the user credentials attached to the planted files were not mine. They belonged to Jocelyn Abbott. Not just one file. Several. Paula's face changed as she moved through the report. Investigator face. Real investigator face. The kind that appears when someone realizes the client may have handed them a loaded bag and called it evidence. She clicked another file. Login timestamp. Source device. Administrative override. Jocelyn's executive access. Denise turned very slowly toward Jocelyn. Jocelyn sat frozen, her mouth slightly open. For once, she did not have a comeback ready. A small miracle. Someone call the Vatican. Daniel recovered first. This is absurd. Miss Abbott is attempting to redirect from her own misconduct. Paula did not look at him. Mr. Mercer, she said. Were you aware that the logs provided to my firm appear to have been altered after creation? That is not established. It is strongly indicated. Jocelyn stood. I don't have to sit here and be accused by her. I tilted my head. Interesting. I was just thinking the same thing. She pointed at me. You have no idea what you're messing with. There she was. Not the bored sister. Not the golden daughter. Not the polished young executive. The frightened beneficiary of a lie. Paula closed the laptop halfway. But not before copying the relevant report into her own secure case folder. I will need to suspend my firm's preliminary findings, she said, pending further review. Daniel looked like he wanted to bite through his own teeth. Denise folded her arms. I think this meeting is over. Not quite, I said. Everyone looked at me. I slid a printed copy of my independent DNA report across the table. Not to Daniel. To Jocelyn. Her eyes dropped to it. She read the paternity line first. Then the maternal line. Her face drained. I did not say anything. I wanted to watch the truth reach her without my help. She looked up at me. For the first time in my life, Jocelyn Abbott looked unsure of where she stood. Beatrice isn't my mother, I said quietly. Vance is my father. And everything he told us was a lie. Daniel snatched the report from the table. You are not authorized to distribute private genetic material. It's mine, I said. That makes it private when I say so. Not when it helps your client. Paula stood and gathered her materials. Mr. Mercer. My firm will be contacting Abbott Holdings separately. Until we verify the origin of these logs, we will not support any criminal referral. That sentence landed like a door closing. Daniel knew it. Jocelyn knew it. I picked up my flash drive, slipped it back into my purse, and stood. Denise opened the conference room door. I looked at Jocelyn one last time. You told me I was embarrassing myself, I said. You might want to save that text. It's about to become historic. Then I walked out, not fast, not shaking, not triumphant either, just steady. Behind me, I heard Paula ask Daniel for the original source files. I heard Daniel say something sharp. I heard Jocelyn's voice rise. And for the first time since this whole thing began, I realized Vance had not sent them to stop me because he was confident. He had sent them because he was running out of time. By the time I reached my desk, my phone was vibrating. Arthur, I answered. Tell me you're somewhere private, he said. I stepped into the stairwell. I am now. We have enough, he said. Marisol found supporting transfers tied to the West Monroe sale. With what happened today, we can argue active concealment and retaliation. My hand tightened around the phone. What does that mean? It means we file before they close. I looked through the narrow stairwell window at the parking lot below. 6 days had become almost no time at all. Vance had tried to scare me into signing away my mother's legacy. Instead, he had handed us proof that he knew exactly what he was hiding. Arthur's voice came through calm and firm. Clara, go home. Pack the documents you have. Do not speak to Vance. Do not speak to Beatrice. Do not answer Jocelyn. What are you going to do? There was a pause. Then Arthur said the first truly beautiful legal phrase I had ever heard. We're going to freeze them. I went home exactly like Arthur told me, which was impressive because every angry bone in my body wanted to drive straight to Abbott Holdings and ask my father how it felt to lose a fight to the daughter he had spent 28 years calling a mistake. But Arthur was right. You do not win against men like Vance by giving them a scene. You win by giving a judge paperwork. So I went back to my apartment, locked the door, and packed every document into the battered canvas tote I usually used for groceries. Not glamorous. Not dramatic. Just trust summaries. DNA results. County records. Screenshots. Emails. Financial trails. And enough printed proof to make the tote handles complain. By then, the sky had gone dark, and my phone had become a little box of family panic. Vance called. Beatrice called. Daniel Mercer called. Jocelyn texted once. "You have no idea what Daddy can do." I stared at that message while standing in my kitchen with a stack of legal papers in one hand and a peanut butter sandwich in the other. Daddy? She still thought this was about him being powerful. That was the funny thing about people who live inside privilege too long. They start mistaking access for ownership. Jocelyn had been riding in cars she did not pay for, sleeping in properties she did not earn, and building a reputation with money that traced back to my mother. But because everyone around her clapped, smiled, and called her impressive, she believed the applause was proof. I did not answer. Arthur had been very clear. No contact, no threats, no speeches, no clever little texts. Even though I had at least 3 good ones loaded and ready, instead, I shut off notifications, made coffee, and waited for the retired lawyer to call me back. He called a little after 10. "I need you at my office by 7 tomorrow morning." "I thought you were retired." "I am. The office is old. The coffee is bad. And the copier still works. That is enough." At 7 the next morning, I found Arthur Sterling in a small office above a pharmacy on Main Street. The sign downstairs had his name in faded gold letters. Sterling Law. The hallway smelled like dust, paper, and cough drops from the store below. Inside, Arthur had already turned the place into a command center. Marisol Grant was there too, sitting at a conference table with her laptop open, wearing reading glasses and an expression that suggested she had personally offended several offshore accounts before breakfast. She looked up at me. "You brought everything?" I lifted the tote. "And a sandwich." "Good," she said. "You'll need both." For the next several hours, they worked like people who had been waiting a long time for the facts to finally line up. Arthur drafted. Marisol calculated. I answered questions, clarified timelines, and signed affidavits until my hands started to cramp. No yelling. No dramatic music. Just paper. Stacks of it. Birth records. DNA report. Trust documents. County filings. Public corporate records. Evidence of the attempted asset sale. The fake accusation packet from Abbott Holdings. Metadata showing Jocelyn's involvement. Vance's deadline texts. Daniel Mercer's pressure emails. Marisol's transfer analysis. Arthur's sworn statement that he had been told, "I died as a toddler." That one made the room go quiet when he signed it. I watched his hand move across the page. Slow but steady. "Arthur," I said, "did you ever believe them?" He capped the pen. I did not want to. That answer hurt more than a clean yes. He looked at me. "Your mother was careful, Clara. She knew Vance had ambition. She did not know how far he would go. But she was not blind. She created safeguards." "Then how did he get this far?" Arthur's mouth tightened. "Because safeguards depend on truthful reporting. If the person managing the trust lies, hides the beneficiary, manipulates records, and convinces everyone the child is dead or illegitimate, the machine slows down." "Slows down," I repeated. "It does not stop." That was the first time I understood what he had been building. Not revenge, a restart. By late morning, Arthur was ready. He filed for an emergency ex parte injunction in federal court. Ex parte meant Vance would not get advance warning. That mattered. If Vance knew the filing was coming, he could move money, delete records, pressure witnesses, push the West Monroe sale through faster, or do what rich people always do when caught near a burning building: point at someone poorer and call them suspicious. The filing asked the court to freeze assets connected to Evelyn's original trust, halt the West Monroe high-rise transfer, preserve financial records, and restrict movement of funds linked to Abbott Holdings, Jocelyn's entities, and any accounts suspected of receiving misappropriated trust money. It also asked for expedited discovery. That phrase sounded polite. Arthur explained it meant, "Hand over the records before you have time to bury them." Beautiful. I was beginning to appreciate legal English. It had the emotional warmth of a tax audit. But when used correctly, it could hit like a brick. The hearing happened faster than I expected. I did not even go into the courtroom. Arthur handled the emergency appearance with a litigation partner he trusted, a woman named Elaine Foster, who had come out of semi-retirement for what she called a proper old-fashioned fiduciary mess. I sat in Arthur's office with Marisol, drinking bad coffee and pretending not to watch the clock. That was when my fear finally caught up with me. Not loud fear, quiet fear. The kind that sits beside you and points out everything that could still go wrong. What if the judge denied it? What if Vance had hidden the trust too well? What if Daniel spun it as a family dispute? What if the West Monroe sale closed before the order hit? What if, after all this, I was still just Clara Abbott, the unwanted daughter holding a folder nobody cared about? Marisol must have seen it on my face. She closed her laptop halfway. "You know what people like Vance count on?" she asked. "Expensive lawyers?" "That too. But mostly exhaustion. They drag things out until normal people get tired, scared, embarrassed, or broke." I looked down at my hands. "I've been tired for 28 years. She nodded. "Then you're trained." That should not have comforted me. But it did. A little after 3, Arthur called. Marisol put him on speaker. His voice was calm. The injunction was granted. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I could not speak. Arthur continued. Temporary asset freeze. Preservation order. Emergency halt on the West Monroe transaction. Expedited production of financial records. The judge found sufficient risk of dissipation and concealment. Marisol whispered. "Got them." I pressed my fingertips against my mouth, not because I was about to cry, because if I opened it too fast, I might laugh like a cartoon villain. "And I was trying to stay classy," Arthur said. "Clara, listen carefully. This is not the end. It is the door opening." "I know." "No. You don't?" "Not yet. Once the banks receive the order, accounts can lock very quickly. Vance will know soon." "How soon?" Arthur paused. "Probably when something declines." I did not understand what he meant until that evening. The video hit social media before dinner. Not from a news station. Not from anyone official. Just a shaky phone recording posted by someone who had clearly been in the right place at the right time and possessed the natural American instinct to film rich people melting down in public. The caption read, "Woman loses it at luxury dealership after cards decline." I clicked it, and there was Jocelyn, standing inside a high-end car dealership under bright showroom lights, surrounded by polished vehicles that looked like they came with their own attitude problems. She was wearing oversized sunglasses on top of her head, a camel coat, and the furious expression of someone who had never been told no by a payment terminal before. Behind her were several salespeople, 2 uncomfortable-looking managers, and what appeared to be a small group of bridesmaids trying to pretend they were not involved. A shiny row of cars sat near the glass wall. Wedding party vehicles, if I had to guess. Of course, Jocelyn had decided that her engagement celebration needed a fleet of luxury cars. Because apparently nothing says lifelong commitment like financially suspicious transportation. In the video, she handed over a black card. The salesman ran it. Declined. Jocelyn laughed sharply. "Run it again." He did. Declined. She pulled out another card. Declined. Then another. Declined. By the third one, the manager stepped closer, lowering his voice. The phone filming caught enough. "Ma'am, the account appears to be restricted." "Restricted?" Jocelyn snapped. "Do you know who I am?" There it was. The national anthem of people who are about to have a very bad afternoon. The manager kept his voice polite. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We received a notice connected to a federal asset freeze. We cannot complete the transaction." Jocelyn froze. Not because she did not understand. Because she did. One of the bridesmaids whispered, "Yo, Sage. What's going on?" Jocelyn turned on the manager. "That's impossible. Call the bank." "We have, ma'am." "Then call again." A few people in the showroom were watching openly now. Someone near the back muttered, "Oh, wow." Jocelyn snatched the card back. "This is a mistake," the manager said. "I understand this is frustrating." "No, you don't understand anything. Then she did something I had seen her do 100 times in private. She tried to make humiliation someone else's fault. She accused the salesman of incompetence. She accused the bank of discrimination. She accused the manager of embarrassing her on purpose. She demanded privacy after loudly creating the situation herself, which felt very Abbott of her. Then one of the bridesmaids said the worst possible thing. "Is this about your dad's company?" Jocelyn whipped around so fast I thought she might sprain something valuable. The video ended there. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, staring at the paused image of my sister's face. For years, Jocelyn's life had been smooth because other people absorbed the impact. Bills disappeared. Mistakes got fixed. Doors opened. Her name stayed clean while money moved quietly behind it. Now, in the middle of a showroom full of chrome, glass, and witnesses, the Abbott shine cracked, not completely, but enough for strangers to see through it. My phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then Vance called. Then Beatrice. Then Daniel Mercer. Then Jocelyn. I watched each name appear and disappear. For once, they were the ones locked outside a door. A few minutes later, Arthur texted, "Do not celebrate publicly. Do not respond. Save the video." I saved it. Then I made myself dinner. Nothing fancy. Scrambled eggs and toast. Because even historical justice does not wash dishes for you. I was halfway through eating when my phone lit up again. This time, it was a text from Vance. "You stupid girl. You have no idea what you just did." I read it twice. Then I took a screenshot and forwarded it to Arthur. A moment later, he replied, "Thank him for the retaliation evidence." Silently. I smiled for the first time all day. Not because I was happy, not exactly. Because somewhere, wherever my mother's name had been buried under Vance's lies, the ground had just shifted, and my father had finally felt it move. The next morning, I woke up to 37 missed calls and one voicemail from Vance that sounded like a man trying very hard not to commit a felony through the phone. I did not listen to the whole thing. I got about 10 seconds in. Heard him say, "You will fix this today," and decided my blood pressure deserved better. Arthur had told me not to respond. So I did not. I made coffee, took a shower, and went through my usual routine, like my father's empire had not just been locked behind a federal order. That was harder than it sounds. There is no normal way to butter toast while knowing a judge has frozen the bank accounts of the people who spent your entire life calling you a mistake. Still, I tried. At around 9, my apartment buzzer rang. I looked at the little screen by the door. Vance stood in the lobby. Beatrice stood beside him. Of course they did. Vance looked nothing like the controlled man from the autumn dinner. His hair was still combed. His coat was still expensive. But his face had gone hard and raw at the edges. Beatrice wore a pale blue coat and a scarf tied neatly at her throat. Because apparently even a financial emergency required accessories. I did not buzz them in. My phone rang immediately. Vance. I let it ring. Then my buzzer rang again. Then a text came through. "Open the door." I stared at it. There was something almost funny about that. For 28 years, he had treated me like I did not belong in his family, his house, his name, or his future. But now, when his accounts froze and his daughter had a public meltdown in a luxury dealership, suddenly he expected access. Family is amazing that way. I called Arthur. "They're downstairs," I said. "Do not let them in. I wasn't planning to serve tea." "Good. If they refuse to leave? Call building security." I looked at the screen again. Beatrice was talking softly to Vance. He was not listening. He kept looking straight into the camera, like he could intimidate the wiring. Arthur continued. "If you choose to speak to them, record the conversation, if your state law allows it. It does. Then keep the door open, or meet them in a common area." I thought about that. Then I looked around my apartment, my space, my table, my couch, my locked filing box, my walls, plain as they were. For once, I did not want to be pushed out of my own room by fear. "I'll let them up," I said. Arthur paused. "Clara, I'll record. The chain lock stays on until I'm ready. And if he raises his voice, I call security." Another pause. "All right. Put me on standby. Do not let him take documents." "I know." "And Clara?" "Yes?" Do not expect decency. I almost laughed. Arthur. I was raised by these people. I buzzed them in. Before they reached my floor. I started recording on my phone and placed it face down on the bookshelf near the door. Then I set the DNA report and trust copies on the coffee table. Not all originals. Copies. Vance Abbott was not getting within arm's reach of anything I could not replace. When the knock came, it was not really a knock. It was 3 hard hits. Like he owned the door. I opened it with the chain still latched. Vance stood there. Eyes blazing. Open it. Good morning to you too. His jaw tightened. Do not play games with me. Beatrice leaned forward. Voice soft. Clara. Honey. This has gone too far. Honey. That word sounded strange coming from her. She used it the way some people use oven mitts. Only when touching something they considered unpleasant. I looked at both of them. If you're here to threaten me, the hallway has cameras. Vance's eyes flicked toward the ceiling. Good. I unlatched the chain and stepped back. They entered my apartment like 2 people visiting a place they believed was beneath them but suddenly very important. Beatrice looked around quickly. Her gaze landed on my thrift store armchair, my small kitchen table, the stack of books near the window. I could almost hear her thinking that poverty had finally matched my station. Vance did not bother looking at anything but me. What did you do? He demanded. I closed the door. I filed evidence. No. He snapped. You pulled some computer trick and locked accounts you know nothing about. There it is. I said. I was wondering how long before you blamed the computers. His face darkened. You think this is clever? I think it's documented. He stepped closer. You have frozen payroll accounts, operating accounts, real estate transfers, personal credit lines. You have damaged a company you do not understand. I tilted my head. Funny. I understand enough to know the West Monroe high-rise was not yours to sell. Beatrice made a tiny sound. Vance turned on her fast. Not now. That told me plenty. Beatrice knew about West Monroe. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the fine print. But enough. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the DNA report. You told everyone I was an affair child. Vance's mouth twisted. This again? Yes. I said. This again. Since it was your favorite bedtime story for 28 years. I think we can give it a few minutes. Beatrice put a hand to her chest. Clara. Nobody wanted to hurt you. That one got a real laugh out of me. Not loud. Just enough. You may want to retire that sentence. It's not holding up well. Vance pointed toward the papers. This is not about old family pain. This is about you interfering with active corporate operations. No, I said. It is about why you needed me to sign away my rights before my 30th birthday. For the first time since he walked in, Vance went silent. Beatrice's hand slowly dropped from her chest. I handed the DNA report to her. Read it. She did not take it. Clara. Read it. Vance stepped forward. She doesn't need to read anything. I looked at Beatrice. Not him. Vance is my biological father. Greater than 99.9%. Congratulations. Beatrice. You spent decades pretending to forgive an affair that did not produce me. Her face went pale. Then I pointed to the second section. You, Everton, on the other hand, are a 0% maternal match. Beatrice's eyes moved over the page. I watched the performance leave her face. That was the thing about Beatrice. She had many expressions. Wounded wife. Elegant hostess. Long-suffering stepmother. Delicate victim. But the woman holding that report was not performing. She was exposed, she whispered. Where did you get this? Independent, court-approved lab. Chain of custody. Exactly the kind Vance didn't want. Vance lunged for the paper. I pulled it back before he could grab it. Careful, I said. That is a copy. And you are being recorded. He froze slowly. His eyes moved around the room. Recorded? I smiled. Yes. Turns out I learned caution from my family. For a second, I thought he might explode. Instead, he did something more revealing. He changed tactics. His voice dropped. Clara, you are letting that old fool Sterling manipulate you. That was almost impressive. He had moved from threat to insult in record time. Arthur told me you said I died in a car accident as a toddler. Beatrice closed her eyes. Vance looked away. Only for half a second. But enough. I picked up the trust documents from the table and placed them beside the DNA report. Evelyn Abbott, I said. The name changed the room. Beatrice sat down slowly on the edge of my couch. Vance stayed standing. But his face hardened in a way that told me the act was finished. No more affair, child. No more wounded family. No more legal cleanup. Just the man underneath. You had no right digging into Evelyn's affairs, he said. I stared at him. My mother's affairs. He flinched. There it was again. Not guilt, not sadness, fear of the correct word. Mother. I tapped the trust papers. She built the company. She bought the first properties. She created the trust. She protected those assets for me. And you spent the last 28 years telling everyone I was a mistake so you could keep stealing what she left. Beatrice whispered. It wasn't that simple. I turned to her. Then make it simple. She looked at Vance. He gave her a warning look so sharp it could cut glass. And just like that, I understood their marriage better than I ever had. Beatrice was not innocent. Not even close. But she was not the architect. She was the woman who chose comfort over truth so many times that eventually the lie became her home, Vance said. Evelyn was unstable. Arthur had warned me he might try that. I kept my face still. She was careful enough to build a trust you couldn't legally own. His nostrils flared. She was paranoid. No, I said. She was accurate. That landed. Vance's control slipped. You have no idea what I carried. That company would have collapsed without me. The company was never yours. I made it what it is. You used it. I protected it. You drained it. He slammed his hand on my coffee table. Beatrice jumped. I did not. That surprised him. Good. For years. That sound would have made me shrink. A slammed hand. A hard voice. A man deciding the room belonged to him. Not anymore. I looked at his hand. Then back at his face. You don't get to pound furniture in my apartment. His breathing was heavy. You are still that ungrateful little girl. No, I said. I am Evelyn Abbott's daughter. The room went dead quiet. I picked up the injunction copy and held it out to him. This freeze is not a glitch. It is not a computer trick. It is not me being difficult. He did not take the paper. So I placed it on the table between us. You spent 28 years telling everyone I was a mistake so you could steal my mother's legacy. I said. The freeze isn't a glitch. Vance. It's an eviction. Beatrice covered her mouth. Vance stared at me with a hatred so clean it almost felt honest. Then he smiled. Not warmly. Not kindly. The smile of a man who still believed he had one locked drawer nobody had opened. You think a temporary order makes you powerful? No, I said. The truth does. He leaned closer. You have started something you cannot finish. I held his stare. Then I guess we'll both be busy. His phone buzzed. He looked down. Whatever he saw made his face change again. Not panic this time. Alarm. Beatrice noticed too. What is it? She asked. He did not answer her. He looked at me like I had reached through the walls of his life and pulled the wiring loose. Then he turned and walked to the door. Beatrice stood quickly and followed. But before she left, she looked back at me. For one strange second, I thought she might say something real. Not an apology. I was not that optimistic. Maybe a name, a detail, a piece of Evelyn. But Beatrice only touched her scarf and whispered, You don't know what she did to him. I looked at her. No, I said. But I'm learning what he did to her. She left without another word. When the door closed, my apartment felt larger. I picked up my phone and stopped the recording. My hands were shaking now. That annoyed me. But I let it happen. Courage is not the absence of shaking. Sometimes courage is shaking after the door closes, because you were too busy standing straight while the danger was still in the room. I sent the recording to Arthur. His reply came 5 minutes later. Very useful. Especially the Evelyn comments. Do not leave your apartment tonight. I locked the door. Then I locked it again. Because apparently once was not enough for my nervous system. Outside. The city kept moving. Cars passed. A dog barked somewhere downstairs. A neighbor laughed in the hallway. Ordinary life. Continuing like my father had not just stood in my living room and confirmed everything by trying not to confirm it. I sat on the couch beside the papers and looked at the photograph of Evelyn. The woman in the hard hat. The woman they erased. The woman who had somehow known enough to leave a trail. For the first time, I did not feel like I was chasing a ghost. I felt like she had been waiting for me to catch up. The next morning, Arthur called before I even finished my coffee. That was never a good sign. Retired men with legal instincts do not call early because they want to chat about the weather. Vance is going ahead with the gala, he said. I looked at the mug in my hand. Of course he is. Jocelyn's engagement gala had been planned for months. Not an engagement party. A gala. Because in the Abbott family, love apparently needed valet parking. A string quartet? And imported orchids. It was being held at the Ritz-Carlton downtown in the Grand Ballroom. The kind of place where people paid more for one floral arrangement than I spent on groceries in a month. Jocelyn was marrying Preston Whitmore, the son of a powerful political family. His father, Graham Whitmore, had spent decades collecting influence, donors, committee seats, and photographs with people who smiled like they had been briefed by lawyers. Vance had been obsessed with that match. Not because he cared about Jocelyn's happiness. Vance cared about marriage the way he cared about business, as a structure for consolidating power. The Whitmores had reputation, connections, political armor. Vance had needed them. Now, with his assets frozen and the West Monroe sale halted, he needed them even more. How is he paying for it? I asked. Arthur made a dry sound. Badly. That told me enough. Personal debt. Emergency credit. Favors. Maybe loans against whatever had not been caught yet. Vance would rather walk barefoot over broken glass than admit publicly that the Abbott machine was cracking. So what happens tonight? I asked. Federal authorities are executing a search warrant related to financial devices and records. I sat up straighter. At the gala? At the hotel. Timing is not my decision, but not a coincidence. Arthur paused. No. I looked toward the stack of documents on my kitchen table. What do you need from me? Nothing reckless. That sounds like something you say before asking me to do something reckless. I want you present. I let that settle. You want me to go to Jocelyn's engagement gala uninvited? You have standing. You also have identification, documentation, and a right to be represented during certain proceedings involving trust assets. Elaine and I believe your presence could be useful. Useful? I repeated. That is a dangerous word in a lawyer's mouth. It is he said. Wear something appropriate. Bring nothing you cannot afford to lose. And do not speak publicly unless advised. I looked down at my old sweatpants and coffee-stained t-shirt. Arthur. I was not exactly on the guest list. Good, he said. Then nobody will expect you. That afternoon, I did something I had not done in years. I bought a dress. Not with family money. Not with Abbott money. Not with a credit card attached to a trust nobody told me existed. My own money. I went to a department store. Not a boutique where someone named Madison would tell me a dress was an investment piece, while I mentally calculated rent. I found a dark green dress. It's simple, fitted, long enough to be elegant and comfortable enough to let me breathe. Miracle of miracles. It was on sale. I bought shoes too. Sensible heels. I was going to confront a family fraud, not audition for ankle surgery. When I looked in the fitting room mirror, I did not see Jocelyn's version of elegance. No diamonds. No designer label. No soft lighting arranged by staff. I saw myself. Clara Abbott, Evelyn's daughter. That was enough. The Ritz-Carlton ballroom glowed when I arrived. Gold light. White flowers. Polished floors. Champagne glass. Musicians in black. And guests dressed like they had all agreed to pretend financial crime was not trending. A framed sign near the entrance read, "Celebrating Jocelyn and Preston." Underneath, in smaller letters, was a quote about legacy and love. I nearly laughed. Legacy was getting quite the workout in that family. I checked my coat and walked in alone. For about 3 seconds. Nobody noticed me. Then they did. It happened like a ripple. One head turned. Then another. A woman in pearls whispered to her husband. A man from Abbott Holdings stared at me. Looked away. Then looked back as if hoping I had become someone else in between. Jocelyn stood near the center of the ballroom in a pale silver gown, surrounded by bridesmaids and future in-laws. Her smile was bright, brittle, and working overtime. Preston Whitmore stood beside her, handsome in a forgettable way. with the expression of a man who had been raised to believe discomfort was something staff handled. Vance saw me before Jocelyn did. His face went still, then he moved. Fast. He crossed the ballroom with Daniel Mercer close behind him, both wearing tuxedos and the expressions of men who had just spotted a fire near the curtains. "What are you doing here?" Vance said under his breath. I smiled politely. "Enjoying the orchids." Daniel stepped closer. "You were not invited." I noticed. This is a private event. In a hotel ballroom paid through funds currently under review, connected to parties named in a federal asset freeze. I said. "But sure." "Lovely room." Vance's eyes burned. "Leave." Before I could answer, Arthur appeared at my side. He wore a black suit and leaned on his cane, looking every inch like a retired lawyer who had decided retirement was overrated when fraud was available. "She is with me," Arthur said. Vance's face twisted. "You haven't." Arthur nodded. "Me." For a moment, the two old men stared at each other across 28 years of buried truth. Then Daniel motioned toward hotel security. Two security staff approached. "Cautious but professional," Daniel said. "This woman is trespassing." Arthur reached into his jacket and produced paperwork. "No, she is not. And before this becomes embarrassing for your client, I suggest you look toward the entrance." Daniel turned. So did Vance. Two federal marshals entered the ballroom with Elaine Foster and several agents behind them. Not running, not shouting, just walking with the calm authority of people who did not need to raise their voices because everyone else would lower theirs. The music kept playing for about 5 confused seconds, then it stopped. That was when Jocelyn finally saw me. Her face changed in stages. Confusion, recognition, anger, fear. She left Preston's side and hurried toward us, silver gown swishing around her legs. "What did you do?" she hissed. I looked at her. "Which part?" Her eyes flashed. "This is my engagement." I remember. The invitations were very tasteful. Vance stepped between us. "Arthur, you are making a mistake." Arthur looked toward the marshals, who were now speaking quietly with hotel management and Daniel Mercer. "No," he said. "I believe we are correcting one." The ballroom had gone nearly silent, except for whispers traveling table to table. Rich people do whisper differently. Poor people whisper to avoid being rude. Rich people whisper like they are already planning how to describe the scandal at brunch. Elaine Foster approached and handed Daniel a copy of the warrant. "We are executing a federal search warrant for specified financial devices and records related to Abbott Holdings, associated trust assets, and named affiliated entities." Daniel's mouth tightened. "This is a private social event." Elaine gave him a look. Fraud rarely checks the calendar. I liked her more every time she spoke. The agents did not storm the room. This was not television. They moved toward Vance's personal security man, then toward a side office where event staff had stored briefcases, laptops, to phones, and personal items. The marshals maintained the perimeter. Calm, controlled, legal. That made it worse for Vance. He could not call it chaos. It was procedure. Graham Whitmore, Jocelyn's future father-in-law, walked over slowly. He was tall, silver-haired, and carried himself like a man used to rooms adjusting around him. "Vance," he said, voice low. "What is happening?" Vance turned instantly smooth. "Graham, this is a misunderstanding. A family matter that has been weaponized by a disgruntled relative." There it was. Disgruntled relative? I had graduated from mistake to legal nuisance. Progress is progress. Graham looked at me. "And you are?" I met his eyes. "Clara Abbott. Evelyn Abbott's daughter." His expression shifted slightly. He knew the name, not the whole story. Maybe. But enough. Arthur handed me a folder. Not thick, not dramatic, just clean, organized, and devastating. Inside was Marisol's forensic accounting report, the $45 million attempted West Monroe transfer, trust-linked funds routed through Jocelyn's entities, suspicious payments tied to Gala costs, personal credit lines, Jocelyn's PR firm, luxury assets, and the pending federal inquiry. Arthur spoke quietly. "Give it to him." I did. Not to Preston, not to Jocelyn, to Graham Whitmore. Because Arthur understood reputation, so did Vance, so did Graham. Men like that did not fear noise. They feared paper with their names near it. Graham opened the folder. Vance took one step forward. Graham. I strongly advise you not to entertain. Graham lifted one hand. Vance stopped. That alone was worth the price of my sensible heels. The ballroom watched while Graham read. His face did not change much. Powerful men trained for that. But his jaw tightened once. Then again. He turned a page. He read Marisol's summary. He paused on the line about the attempted $45 million asset liquidation connected to marital positioning and external political family financing interests. Then he looked at Jocelyn. Did you know about this? Jocelyn's mouth opened. Nothing came out. That was answer enough. Preston stepped closer. Dad? Graham closed the folder. He set his untouched drink on a nearby table. Then he looked at his wife, his son, and two older relatives standing behind them. We're leaving. Jocelyn grabbed Preston's arm. Wait, this is insane. Preston. Tell him. Preston looked at his father. Then, at Jocelyn. He gently removed her hand. Not cruelly. That probably made it worse. Justice, he said. Is any of this false? She looked around the room, searching for rescue the way she had searched for working credit cards at the dealership. Daddy, she said. Vance moved toward her, but Graham had already turned. His wife followed. Preston followed. One by one. The Whitmore family walked out of the ballroom without raising their voices, without a public speech, without even looking back. That silence did more damage than yelling ever could. Jocelyn stood alone on the edge of the dance floor. Silver gown, glowing under the lights. Surrounded by flowers, paid for with money now under suspicion, and guests who suddenly found their phones very interesting. For years, she had been the golden child. That night, under the chandeliers, everyone saw the gold flake off. Vance looked at me with pure fury. You ruined her life. I looked at Jocelyn, then back at him. No, I said. You financed it with stolen money. I just brought receipts. Arthur touched my elbow lightly. Clara, that was the signal. Say no more. I stepped back. Across the room, agents collected devices. Daniel Mercer argued in a low voice and lost politely. Beatrice sat near a table, pale and silent, one hand gripping her clutch. Guests began slipping out in small groups. Because scandal is exciting until federal paperwork arrives. Jocelyn stared at the ballroom doors where Preston had disappeared. Then she turned to me. For 1 second, I saw not the polished sister, not the spoiled executive, not the woman who had mocked my apartment and my job. I saw a terrified woman whose entire identity had been built on a foundation she never owned. I did not pity her. Not yet. But I understood the collapse. Vance had built his whole family like a stage set. Jocelyn got the spotlight. Beatrice got the martyr role. I got the shame. Evelyn got erased. And now the walls were being rolled away in front of everyone. Arthur guided me toward the exit. Behind us. Jocelyn's voice cracked. Clara. I stopped but did not turn around. She said, You don't even care what happens to us? I looked back then. The whole ballroom seemed to wait. I cared for 28 years. I said, Nobody counted it. Then I walked out with Arthur Sterling beside me. Past the orchids. Past the silent guests. Past the sign about legacy and love. Outside. The night air hit my face. For the first time since this began, I took a full breath. Not because it was over, because the lie had finally become too public to survive. Arthur and I had almost reached the hotel lobby when I heard Vance behind us. Stop! His voice did not echo. It cut. Arthur's hand tightened slightly around the top of his cane. He did not turn right away. And neither did I. For a second. We stood there near the marble columns and the big flower arrangement that probably cost more than my first car. Then Arthur said quietly, Keep walking. I wanted to. I truly did. But something in Vance's voice told me this was not just another threat. This was the sound of a man reaching into the last locked drawer. So I stopped. Arthur seethed. Not pleased. But he stopped too. We turned around. Vance stood a few feet behind us. Tuxedo jacket open. Bow tie slightly crooked. Face flushed with a kind of fury I had never seen from him before. Not the cold father. Not the polished executive. Not the man who could slice you apart with one sentence and still thank the waiter politely. This was uglier. This was panic dressed as rage. Beatrice came up behind him, pale and stiff, clutching her purse with both hands. Jocelyn was farther back, still in that silver gown, mascara dark under her eyes, no longer looking like a bride-to-be from a glossy magazine. She looked young, furious, and lost. For one strange second, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the fake logs, the stolen money, the smug little text about me embarrassing myself. And that feeling took a respectful step back. "You think tonight changes anything?" Vance said. Arthur turned fully toward him. "I think tonight created several useful witnesses." Vance ignored him and looked at me. "You walked into that ballroom and humiliated your sister in front of her future family. My sister helped steal from my mother's trust. She is your family." That one nearly made me laugh. Family. Funny how people only pulled that word out after the bank accounts froze. "You spent my whole life telling me I wasn't family," I said. "You don't get to hand me the word now because it's convenient." Vance's mouth twitched. "You still don't understand what you're up against." Arthur stepped slightly in front of me. "Careful." "Vance." "No." "Arthur. You be careful." Vance pointed at him. "You have no idea what she was like near the end." The lobby seemed to shrink around us. "Evelyn." He was going there. Arthur's face changed. But only a little. "I knew Evelyn well." "You knew the version she performed for you," Vance snapped. "The brilliant young founder. The careful wife. The devoted mother. You didn't live with her." Beatrice took a breath, like she had been waiting for this part. "Clara," she said softly, "there are things you were too young to know." I looked at her. Apparently I was too young to know who my mother was. "So yes. That tracks." Her eyes sharpened. "You always do that. You twist everything into cruelty." "No," I said. "I identify it accurately." Jocelyn made a small sound behind Vance. "God. Listen to her. She finally gets a few papers and thinks she's some tragic heroine." I turned to her. "You're standing in a ruined engagement gala because federal agents are collecting financial devices. And that's your contribution?" Her mouth closed. "Small victories matter." Vance reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. Arthur went still. Vance saw it and smiled. There it was again. That smile? The one that said he still believed he had the key to the room. "You think Evelyn's trust is untouchable?" he said. "It isn't." Arthur's voice went flat. "What did you do?" Vance unfolded the document, just enough for us to see the letterhead. "A medical facility. An old one." My stomach tightened. "My attorneys have retained records showing Evelyn was mentally unstable when she drafted the trust," Vance said. "Paranoid. Delusional. Incapable of sound judgment." Beatrice lowered her eyes. Jocelyn looked from him to the paper, as if she had not known this part was coming. Maybe she had not. Vance continued. "If you keep pushing, I will contest the trust. I will challenge every document. I will tie this up in court for years." Arthur's jaw set. "Those records are false." "Prove it." The words landed hard. Vance turned to me. "You think you won because a judge gave you a temporary freeze? I will bury you in litigation until you are 35. 40. Maybe older. You will spend every dollar you have. You will lose your job. You will lose your apartment. You will sit across from lawyers while they discuss your mother's mental health. Your legitimacy. Your motives. Your little vendetta." He stepped closer. "You wanted the truth. Clara? The truth is that you are still the same lonely girl begging for a place in a family that never wanted you." For a second, the old wound opened. I hated that. I hated that after everything I knew, after every document, after every lie exposed, that sentence still knew where to land. The same lonely girl. There are insults that bounce off because they are too false. Then there are the ones built from pieces of real pain. Beatrice saw it. Of course she did. That woman had spent decades studying my weak spots like a hobby. She moved closer, voice trembling in that careful way of hers. "Clara, your mother was not the Saint Arthur is making her out to be. She was difficult, suspicious. She made Vance miserable. She poisoned everything before she died." I stared at her. "You never met a woman you couldn't blame for a man's greed, did you?" Her face hardened. "You have always been ungrateful. Always. We fed you. We clothed you. We gave you a name. A name you used like a leash. We could have sent you away. That one chilled the air. Even Vance glanced at her. Beatrice realized she had said too much. But it was out now. Arthur's voice was very quiet. Sent her where? Beatrice? She looked away. Vance snapped. Enough! But Beatrice was breathing faster now. Years of polished victimhood, cracking under the pressure. You have no idea what it was like, she said to me. Living in that house with her memory everywhere. Her buildings. Her papers. Her daughter. Vance trying to move forward while everyone whispered about Evelyn as if she built the sun. I understood then. Not forgiveness. Understanding. Beatrice had not only helped bury Evelyn for money. She had helped bury her because she could not stand living in a house where the dead first wife was bigger than she would ever be. That was pathetic. And dangerous. Vance lifted the medical paper again. I will destroy the trust. Arthur looked at the document. Then at Vance. No. He said. You won't. Vance laughed once. You always were sentimental. Arthur reached into the inside pocket of his coat. Evelyn was not. He removed a small plastic case. Inside was an audio cassette. Old. Labeled in blue ink. E. Abbott. Statement. 1996. Vance's face changed so completely that even Jocelyn noticed. What is that? She asked. Arthur did not answer her. He looked at Vance. You should have remembered who you married. Vance took one step back. Arthur turned to me. Your mother prepared several contingencies. I hoped we would not need this one tonight. I could barely breathe. Arthur pulled a small digital recorder from his other pocket. The cassette has been professionally transferred and authenticated. Chain of custody preserved. Original stored securely. Of course it had. Arthur Sterling might have been retired. But the man did not play checkers when the situation called for chess. He pressed play. At first, there was a soft hiss. Then a woman's voice filled the space between us, clear, young, steady. My mother. If this statement is being played, then Vance has attempted to challenge the trust on the basis of my mental capacity. My knees almost gave out. Arthur's hand came to my elbow, steadying me without making a scene. The recording continued. I am making this statement voluntarily on March 3rd, 1996. In the presence of counsel. I am of sound mind. I have been evaluated independently. Copies of those evaluations are attached to the sealed trust packet. Vance whispered. No. Evelyn's voice did not care. My husband, Vance Abbott, has repeatedly pressured me to transfer controlling interest of my real estate holdings to him. He has represented my caution as paranoia. He has called my legal protections an insult. I believe he intends to gain control of my company and remove future authority from my daughter. Clara. My name. In my mother's voice. Not mistake. Not complication. Not a fair child. My daughter. I covered my mouth. Jocelyn stared at the recorder like it had opened a hole in the floor. Beatrice's face had gone gray. Evelyn continued. If Vance claims I was unstable, coerced, delusional, or incapable, then I direct counsel to trigger federal oversight provisions contained in Section 12 of the Trust. Any attempted challenge by Vance Abbott, his future spouse, assigns, or affiliated beneficiaries shall require immediate audit, outside administration, and review by the oversight committee named herein. Arthur stopped the recording. The silence afterward was enormous. Vance looked old suddenly. Not weak, never that, but old in the way men look when the world finally stops bending around them. Arthur slipped the recorder back into his pocket. She knew your exact move before you made it, he said. Vance's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I looked at him. For 28 years, he had told me I was the shameful secret. But Evelyn had known. She had named me. She had protected me. She had seen him clearly when everyone else was still applauding his charm. And now, almost 3 decades later, her voice had walked into the room and taken the last weapon out of his hand. Jocelyn whispered. Daddy? There was no crown in the word this time. Vance turned on Arthur. That tape is inadmissible. Arthur shrugged. Perhaps. Perhaps not. But the attached evaluations, the oversight clause, the sealed packet, and your attempt to use forged medical records will be quite admissible. Forged. There it was. Vance did not deny it. Not fast enough. Elaine Foster appeared from the ballroom entrance with one of the federal agents beside her. She must have been watching from a distance. "Mr. Stain. Abbott," she said. "I would advise you not to make any further statements tonight." That was lawyer language for "please stop digging before you hit water." Vance looked at me one last time. The hatred was still there, but now there was something else underneath it. Defeat. Not complete. Not final. Men like Vance do not collapse all at once. They look for cracks until the very end. But this crack was wide. I stepped closer. Just enough so he had to hear me. "You told me my whole life that I came from shame," I said. "But I came from the only honest person in that house." Beatrice made a wounded sound. I did not look at her. Jocelyn was crying now. Quietly. Angrily. Maybe for herself. Maybe for the life that had just vanished. I did not know. I was not responsible for decoding her tears anymore. Arthur touched my arm. "Clara, we're done here." This time, I listened. We walked toward the lobby doors. Behind us, Vance said nothing. That was the loudest sound I had ever heard from him. The silence Vance left behind did not last long. Men like my father never really disappear quietly. They just stop talking long enough for the lawyers to start billing. By Monday morning, the story had already spread through the business community, the charity boards, the political circles, and every country club dining room within a 30-mile radius. Nobody needed a press release. Rich people pretend they hate gossip. But give them one federal asset freeze, one ruined engagement gala, and one family trust scandal. And suddenly, everybody becomes a journalist. Arthur told me not to read comments. So naturally, I read a few. That was a mistake. Some people called me brave. Some called me greedy. Some said Vance must have had his reasons. Some said Jocelyn was the real victim because her engagement ended publicly. That last one made me close the laptop before I started yelling at strangers on the internet. Which is how you know personal growth is real. The official consequences came without drama. No courtroom screaming. No one burst through double doors shouting, "Objection! This was not television." Real consequences come through emails, filings, notices, hearings, audits, subpoenas, and men in expensive suits suddenly discovering the phrase, "no comment." The federal investigation moved fast because the asset freeze had preserved records before Vance could clean house. And Vance, for all his arrogance, had made one fatal mistake. He had believed everyone around him was either loyal, afraid, or paid enough to stay quiet. He was wrong. Once the accounts froze, people started talking. Former employees, bookkeepers, a junior attorney who had been asked to backdate an internal memo, an assistant who had copies of wire instructions, a banker who had flagged suspicious transfers years earlier and been told to stay in his lane. Even one of Jocelyn's event vendors provided invoices that tied directly to Abbott Holdings accounts marked for property development. Marisol called it a beautiful trail. I called it my mother's money wearing a fake mustache. Within weeks, Vance was indicted on multiple fraud-related charges, including wire fraud, embezzlement from trust-linked assets, falsification of financial records, and conspiracy to conceal beneficiary rights. Beatrice was indicted too. That surprised people who still believed her soft voice meant soft hands. It did not surprise me. Her signature appeared on enough documents to bury the performance. She had helped validate false family narratives. She had benefited from trust money. She had signed sworn statements connected to my supposed illegitimacy. She had confirmed to Arthur, years ago, that I was dead. When I saw that in writing, I sat very still for a long time. Not because I was shocked, because some betrayals are different when they move from memory to paper. Memory lets people say you misunderstood. Paper is less generous. Jocelyn was not indicted at the same level as Vance. At least not at first. Her lawyers argued she had been misled by her father, that she did not understand the trust structure, that she believed payments and assets were lawful family distributions. That might have worked if she had not planted fake logs to frame me. Actions have a way of ruining a good victim speech. She reached a cooperation agreement after months of pressure. That was Arthur's polite way of saying she started talking when she realized designer tears were not legal strategy. Her PR firm collapsed almost immediately. Apparently, Clients do not love the phrase "under financial investigation" attached to their reputation architect. Who could have guessed? Her condo went into court-supervised review. The Aspen property was tied up. The cars went back. The credit lines vanished. Her engagement was over. And the Whitmores removed every public mention of her so quickly you would have thought she was an expired coupon. The last I heard. Jocelyn moved into a small apartment on the edge of town and took an entry-level job at a local marketing agency. Not prison. Not ruin. Just ordinary life. A one-bedroom apartment. A used car. A manager who expected her to show up on time. A paycheck that required work before spending. The exact life she had spent years mocking me for living. I did not celebrate that. I will not lie and say I cried over it either. There is a middle place between cruelty and pity. That is where I put Jocelyn. One afternoon, about 3 months after the gala, she called me. I almost did not answer, then I did. Mostly because curiosity remains one of my poorer habits. "Clara," she said. No nickname. No insult. No sharp little laugh. Just my name. "What do you want?" She was quiet for a moment. I didn't know everything. I looked out my apartment window. That is not the same as knowing nothing. I know. That was new. Jocelyn Abbott admitting anything without a witness present probably counted as a historic event. She took a breath. I knew Dad hated talking about Evelyn. I knew Mom hated you. I knew the money came easy. I told myself that was just how families like ours worked. Families like ours. I said. Didn't work. That was the problem. "I know," she whispered. There it was again. I know. Small words. Late words. Not enough words. She did not ask me to forgive her. I respected that. Or maybe her lawyer had coached her well. Either way, it saved us both time. "I'm sorry," she said finally. I believed she meant it in that moment. I also believed some apologies arrive after the house burns down because the person holding the matches finally got smoke in their own eyes. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "Is that all? For now?" "Yes," she cried then, quietly. I did not comfort her. That may sound cold. But it was not. Comfort had been my assigned job in that family for too long. Make Beatrice feel forgiven. Make Vance feel respected. Make Jocelyn feel superior. Make everyone comfortable with what they had done. I had retired from that position. After the indictments, the court appointed temporary oversight for Abbott Holdings while the trust accounting was completed. Arthur stayed involved. Elaine handled litigation. Marisol kept finding money trails. And every time she did, she sent emails with subject lines, so dry they became funny. New discrepancy identified. Additional unauthorized transfer. Another one. Sorry. I printed that last one and taped it above my desk for a week. My 30th birthday was still ahead. But the court recognized my status as the rightful beneficiary and majority interest holder tied to Evelyn's trust. That meant I had a seat at the table before the trust fully matured. The first time I walked into the Abbott Holdings boardroom as Evelyn Abbott's daughter and legal beneficiary, nobody introduced me as a mistake. Funny how paperwork improves manners. The room was full of people who had once treated me like background noise. Senior executives, outside counsel, interim trustees, financial officers. A few looked embarrassed. A few looked nervous. One man who had ignored me for years asked if I wanted coffee. I said yes. Cream. No sugar. Let him be useful. Arthur sat to my right. Marisol sat across from me. Elaine had a stack of documents thick enough to stun a horse. At the head of the table, where Vance used to sit, there was an empty chair. I looked at it for a moment. Then I sat down. No thunder. No applause. No dramatic music. Just a chair. But for me, it meant everything. The company audit took months. Some assets were damaged. Some money was gone for good. Some deals had to be unwound. Some people resigned before they could be fired, which is corporate language for left before someone turned over the right rock. We restored what we could. The West Monroe high-rise stayed in the trust portfolio. The properties Evelyn had built were protected, and when the legal dust settled enough for a public announcement, I made one decision that mattered more to me than any title. Abbott Holdings would no longer be Abbott Holdings. The company was rebranded under its original name, Evelyn Sterling Properties. Sterling had been my mother's maiden name. Arthur cried when he saw the draft logo. He pretended it was allergies. I let him have that. The new name went up first on the West Monroe building. I stood across the street that morning with Arthur, Marisol, Elaine, and a small group of employees who had stayed through the cleanup. A crane lifted the letters into place. Evelyn Sterling Properties. For nearly 3 decades, Vance had used my mother's work while burying her name. Now her name was 30 stories high. I thought I would feel triumph. I did not. Not exactly. Triumph feels loud. This felt steady. Like something crooked had finally been set back where it belonged. A week later, I went alone to the top floor of the West Monroe building. The office up there had been Vance's private executive suite. Dark wood, glass desk, leather chairs. A view of the city that made people talk slower. Like money itself was listening. Most of his things were gone by then. The framed magazine cover had been removed. The awards were boxed for legal review. His personal bar cart was empty, which I considered a small public service. I walked to the window. The city stretched out below me, busy and bright. Cars moved along the streets. People crossed at corners. Office lights flickered on in nearby buildings. For most of my life, I had believed I was standing outside my own family, looking through glass at a world where I did not belong. But the truth was, stranger, I had not been outside because I was unworthy. I had been kept outside because I was the key. Vance knew it. Beatrice knew enough. Jocelyn benefited from it. And Evelyn, somehow, had known I might one day need a trail strong enough to follow home. I took my mother's photograph from my bag, the one from the safety deposit box. Evelyn in jeans, boots, and a hard hat, smiling in front of a building site like she had the nerve to build something in a world that expected her to stand beside a man and clap. I placed it on the desk. For a long time, I said nothing. Then I said, I found it. Not, I won. Not, I got revenge. Just that. I found it. Her name. Her work. Her truth. Myself. People sometimes think revenge means making everyone who hurt you suffer the way you suffered. I understand that feeling. Believe me. I had a few private fantasies involving Vance, a folding chair, and a very long PowerPoint presentation, but real justice, the kind that lets you sleep at night, is not about becoming cruel enough to match them. It is about taking your life back so completely that their lie has nowhere left to stand. Vance had called me an affair child. Beatrice had called me difficult. Jocelyn had called me embarrassing. The court called me beneficiary. The records called me Evelyn's daughter. And for the first time, I stopped waiting for the Abbott family to tell me who I was. That is the thing I would tell anyone listening. Especially if you are older and you have spent years being dismissed by people who benefited from your silence. Do not confuse rejection with truth. Sometimes the people who call you difficult are just angry that you stopped being easy to control. Sometimes the ones who preach family loyalty are the first to use family as a weapon. And sometimes the story you were handed was never your story at all. It was just the one that protected someone else. Ask questions, keep records. Trust the small signs when someone panics over your independence. And never let anyone convince you that wanting respect makes you selfish. I stood in that top-floor office until the sun started lowering over the city. Then I turned off the lights, picked up my mother's photograph, and locked the door behind me. Not because I was afraid someone would take it all away again, because some doors are worth closing yourself. When people spend years telling you who you are, that does not mean they are telling the truth. Sometimes they are only protecting the lie that benefits them. A family name, a shared history, or old memories do not give anyone the right to control you, shame you, or take what belongs to you. Respect is not proven by words at a dinner table. It is proven by honesty, responsibility, and how people treat you when they think you have no power. For anyone who has lived long enough to be dismissed, ignored, or made to feel like a burden, remember this. Your silence may keep the peace, but it can also protect the wrong people. Ask questions. Keep documents. Pay attention when someone becomes angry because you want clarity. That anger may be pointing straight at the truth. Justice does not have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes it looks like standing calmly, holding the right papers, and refusing to sign away your dignity. You are never too old, too tired, or too wounded to reclaim your name, your peace, and your place in your own life.